Welcome to Bible Reader Companion. Our Bible reading this week is 2 Corinthians chapters 9 through 13 and James chapters 1 through 5, with our memory verse being 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 8, in which Paul says in the New King James Version, "And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work." We've talked this week about the need to trust in God and to focus on glorying in Him and not focusing on the physical and the things that we find in our own lives, good or bad, to dwell on. We want to look at our closing lesson this week at James chapter 1, beginning in verse 2. James chapter 1, beginning in verse 2, James writes, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For let not that man suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord." The things that we see here is that our physical life does not necessarily state our relationship with God. Just because we're facing trials doesn't mean that God has cut us off. It may be a test of whether or not we still trust and have trust and faith in God. Think about Job and all that he went through. God allowed him to endure those trials. Do we look at those as opportunities to grow our faith and grow our patience? Do we use those opportunities to glory in the Lord? Say, look, what I'm going through in this life is nothing compared to the glory that I will receive when this life is over. And he says, if you're struggling with that and you need wisdom, where do you turn? You don't turn to the world. You don't turn to men. You don't turn to yourself. Where do you put your faith and trust? You turn to the Lord for that wisdom. You look for what the Lord has to offer. How many times when we're facing trials and we're facing struggles, do we just tend to more buckle down and say, well, I'm going to get through this, instead of saying, let me go to the Word of God. Let me go to God's people. Let me go to the resources that God has given me through His Word and through the relationships with my brethren to get through these trying times. Do we trust in God? Do we glory in Him in these difficult times? Or do we focus on ourselves, whether it's the focus on why am I going through all this and complaining about our trials, or focusing on ourselves and saying, I'm strong, I'm going to get through this, instead of saying I'm going to put my faith in God and I'm going to trust God to get me through this. Paul understood this, James understood this, and they both wanted brethren to understand that whatever we're doing in life, we should be focusing on and trusting in God. That we should trust that if we will simply give our lives to God and trust Him, God will take care of us. It doesn't promise riches in this life. It doesn't promise that everything will be rosy and they'll be without trials. But it does promise that the rewards when this life is over are greater than anything we can ever imagine. And so Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 8, "God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always, having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work." Let us put our faith and trust in God to serve and glorify and honor Him in all that we do. Let us turn to Him in the time of trial. Let us glorify Him when He lifts us up. We thank you for thinking on these things, and we hope you'll join us again next week.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook for more content like this.